Well, today, friends, we're starting a new sermon series called What We Talk About When We Talk About God. And I wonder if you've noticed what I've noticed, that we just get kind of stuck when we talk about God. Like, who is God? Where is God? Why is God the way God is? How am I to describe and make sense of this God? We get stuck. We get stuck when we talk about God, and yet intuitively, down deep in our bones, we still feel this sense of unexplainable reverence and awe, this hum in us that leads us over and over again back to God. You wouldn't be here today if that wasn't true for you. And so what do we make of this? What do we make of this God? Throughout this series, I hope that in new ways, in a new set of words, with a new language, perhaps a language that you can connect with, that relates deeply with maybe this unexpressed way you view God, I hope that we can get at what we talk about when we talk about God. And I want us to do so with some really simple words. Some simple words that you may not have ever thought to use when you talk about God. That God is open. God is both. God is with and for and ahead and so. Open, with, for, ahead, so. And so today we start with the God who is open, who is generously mysterious. Did you hear it today as Jake and Barrett read from Colossians? The Apostle Paul talks about God in the hidden places and the mysteries. Did you hear it? Paul says this God in Jesus is of the heavens and is walking the earth. This God is visible and this God is invisible. Before all things, in all things, holding things together, this open and generous mystery of this God in Jesus is reconciling all things, gathering together, holding all together until this God is in all and through all and revealed in all. This is the mystery that has been hidden throughout the ages, Paul says. Have you ever thought of God as this spacious? Is this open? So that God is reconciling all things so that God can be in all, through all, revealed in all. In all, how expansive, how open is this God? The thing is, we're not nearly open enough to the God who is open. Before COVID, when I was getting coffee or beer regularly with some of you and other people from the community, I would just laugh because in the span of one day, I could basically be asked, Michelle, don't you believe in miracles? You do, right? And then hours later in a completely separate conversation, Michelle, you don't believe in miracles, do you? One person is concerned I've lost my faith, while another person is concerned I've lost my mind. And this is what I mean when I say we're not nearly open enough to the God who is open, are we? There's this giant either or embedded in those questions: faith or intellect, belief or reason, miracles or logic, faith or science. We make it either or, but Paul says this God in Jesus reconciles, brings together, holds together all things so that this God may be in all and through all and revealed in all. We're not nearly open enough to the God who is open. But how did it get this way? Well, to get at that, I think we've got to talk a little bit about physics. And you are in luck, because I never took a physics class in high school or college. But I do know, based on life and the fact that I am clumsy and accident prone, ask my husband that, and help me complete this sentence, y'all. An object in motion stays in motion. I know this because I'm clumsy and accident prone. But I also know this because I do remember in some generic middle school science class learning about Newton's laws and how basic those laws are to the way we think about speed and motion and mass and movement. But before Newton's groundbreaking 17th century book on the law of physics, the reason that the majority of people would have given for why the world works the way it does, well, is because God made it that way. That's how things are. Why would you need an explanation beyond that, right? But Newton was fascinated beyond which that would satisfy for him. He couldn't see it that way. Newton opened up this whole new world for us. He dug out these predictable, knowable, rational rules and explanations that governed how the universe operates and how and the causes that lead to effects and the clear connections between the two. Newton showed that you could know the speed and position of something because motion was understood to be continuous and consistent. Given enough data about weight and speed and a number of other variables, outcomes could be computed and accurately predicted. And this new way of seeing the world brought so many exciting possibilities with it. Things could be built and engineered and created and designed by plotting trajectories and paths and measuring how much opposing force would be needed to stop and move and push and pull things of certain weights and certain speeds. He opened up this whole new way of seeing the world. Along with these new ways of conceiving of the physical world came new ways of thinking about how we know what we know. We've all heard that phrase. You should know it. I think, therefore I am. It's by Descartes. It's so familiar that it's easy to lose the sense of how absolutely groundbreaking those words were when that phrase was uttered for the first time. Because for the majority of people at that time, knowledge was seen as something that humans were just given by God through what is called revelation. If you asked how we know what we know, the standard answer would have been, well, God told us. But Descartes, his fascination outgrew that answer. He didn't just see it that way. He insisted that we can know what we know, not because of a divine being who chose for some reason to reveal it to us, but because we arrived at that knowledge through our own reason and our own logic, which launched humans into this era called the Golden Age of Certainty and gave birth to what we call the scientific method. That system of testing, experimenting, comparing data that scientists use today. And this whole new world was opened up. This explosion of of discovering and exploration, also called the Enlightenment, that opened up human history and moved human understanding forward ahead in astonishing ways. But these understandings also, they have limits. They have limits that we become so aware of when we talk about God. Limits that come into play when we begin to talk about this God who is open, and begin to reflect on how we are not nearly open enough to this God who is open. One of these limits affects how we filter knowledge. That as the world, as this new world of the prominence of reason and logic began to open up to us, other ways of knowing became less important, less emphasized. If the only way we know things now is through testing and prodding of the scientific method, what happens then when we know something in a way that bypasses those tests and processes? Like, does everything we know have to be able to be intellectually proven? In a lab, for something to be valid, it has to be proven repeatedly through tests and experiments that yield demonstrable evidence, right? But what about those things that you just know, absolutely, positively know to be true? What about those things that you would be hard-pressed to produce evidence for if asked? Like explain how that one song just moves you. You know what song I'm talking about. Explain that. Or articulate why you fell in love with that person. Or try to prove any data at all for why that meal you shared with those people you call your friends made your soul sour and dissatisfied and bitter afterward. Which has to lead us to a crucial truth, that there are ways of knowing that don't use our intellect. The truth is that outside of the lab and in the course of our very real lives, some experiences, they just act on us. They seize us, capture us, woo us. And we don't understand them, and we don't stand over them. We engage with them as they just happen to us. We don't know why, but we know it's real. Which brings us back to faith. When a scientist says, I don't understand something fully right now, but I will, given enough time in this method, that is in fact a belief. That is faith. And I'm not talking about people of faith versus people of science. I'm talking about all people of faith. Just faith in different things. Science does this excellent job of telling me why, as a human, I don't have a tail. But it can't explain why I find that fascinating. Your elbows and your pancreas and your sternum are able to be measured and evaluated in very straightforward ways. But what about your soul? It's been said that the soul is naked of all things that bear names. Which I would say is a bit like God. Because when we're talking about God the God who is open, we're talking about a reality known and felt and experienced, but one that cannot be located in any specific physical space in any tangible way, and yet is still the God who in Jesus is all, in all, through all, revealing God's self in all, completely open. When we talk about God, we're talking about something so very real and yet beyond our conventional means of analysis and description. And the Germans actually have a word for this. We don't have one in English language, but they do. And they call it Grenzbegriff. Grenzbegriff. It describes that which is open, so very real, and yet beyond analysis and description. When we talk about the God who is open, we're talking about this Grenzbegriff kind of faith that sees science and faith as the dance partners they've always been, each guiding and informing the other. A few years ago, I was at Fairfax Inova waiting to visit someone post-op. And I decided to visit the hospital chapel, and there was this woman in there sitting in the chapel who told me she had been in the hospital for ongoing cancer treatment. Just a few weeks before, she had been lying in her hospital bed thinking she was not going to make it. She was at her absolute lowest, filled with utter despair and wondering if she was going to die. When this night nurse entered her room and began lovingly taking care of her. The nurse returned repeatedly throughout the night, she said, checking on her and calming her and speaking to her in a way that just lifted her spirit and gave her this sense of hope. And she woke up feeling like a completely different person. Filled with gratitude, she asked the morning nurse for the name of the woman who had cared for her so well. And the nurse said that no one who fit her description worked on that floor of the hospital, wasn't assigned to her room last night. And I wonder what you make of a story like that. Gosh, I have heard so many stories like that. People who don't have enough money to buy groceries, all of a sudden finding their front porch overflowing with food. Really strange and odd and surreal sorts of stories. And yes, some of them can be attributed to basic coincidence. But over the years, I've heard tons of them, and not just from really zealous religious people, but also from the most educated and cynical people I know. Some people hear a story like that and they say, yes, of course. That had to be God. That had to be an angel taking care of her. They're all around us, watching us, guiding us, protecting us. And then others hear people responding like this, and they just roll their eyes, dismissing it as crazy talk. One says, of course she was an angel, and the other says, angels don't exist. This is the dilemma we find ourselves in every Easter. Believe it or not, there are so many people who call themselves Christians, and they dismiss the resurrection of Jesus as, at best, a metaphor, and at worst, fantasy that belongs with all those other stories and beliefs and things that just don't happen. But there's a problem with dismissing all miracles out of hand, and that's that strange things do happen, things with no precedent and no explanation every single day and every single moment, billions and billions of times a second, all around us and in our bodies. Time is bendy and curvy and not consistent, and the universe is curved, and if Earth were slightly closer to the sun, we would all cook, and if it was slightly farther away from the sun, we would all freeze. It's all this grand mystery. It's all miraculous. You and me and the speed of light. It's all miraculous, and it always has been. When we talk about God, who is Grin's Begriff, we're talking about the kind of intellectually honest faith that is as open-minded as the God we worship is open-minded enough to admit that some phenomena have no rational explanation. This is the kind of faith the Apostle Paul is talking about today. He's talking about what it looks like for this God in Jesus, who is utterly open, visible and invisible, before all things, in all things, through all things, reconciling all things. He is talking about what it looks like when we begin to be rightly opened up to the God who is utterly open. He says, this is the mystery that has been hidden throughout the ages. That Christ is gathering all things, even science and faith, reconciling all things so that God may be in all and through all and revealed in all. And this God who is open has revealed this mystery to you, saints, so that you may be rightly open to the mystery, open to the miracles, open to the God who is open. To believe that this is all there is, and we are simply collections of neurons and atoms. That's being closed to anything beyond that particular size and scope of reality. But to believe that there's more here, there's more going on, that there may be a reality beyond what you can comprehend, beyond what you currently see, that is something else. That's leaning into the mystery. That's being open to the God who is open. I offer this to you in the name of God the Father, in the name of Christ his Son, in the name of the Holy Spirit. Would you pray with me today? O God, who is utterly open, who holds together all things, who is in all and through all, so that you, God, and Jesus may be revealed to all. We sit before you today with all of our knowledge, all of our junk, all of our emotions. And we ask you, God, to fill those spaces. Fill the spaces where we grieve. Fill the spaces where we hurt. Fill the spaces where we find joy, and help us see you in that joy. Fill all in all. Be revealed in all, O God. God, make us the ones, your saints, to whom you have revealed this mystery of your openness. Make us open to you, God, the God who is utterly open. Make us open to the possibility. Make us open to the mystery. Make us open to the things beyond what we know and feel and believe. If faith is difficult to us, open us up to the possibility of miracles. And if we know miracles well, if we believe in the angels, open us up to how you move and work through atoms and neurons and in the human body and in the speed of light. God, you are in all and through all, and you long to be revealed in all. And we want to be a part of your work in the world, your mission of revealing God all in all. We join in that prayer, God, that you taught us to pray through your Son, Jesus. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Amen. I want you today to hear from someone in our congregation, our friend Zach Linkay, as he shares with us today how he makes sense of, how he relates to this God who is open in his life, this God who is generous mystery. Would you listen?